This is an example of an anatomical votive. Now, a votive was an offering, a gift that a person gave to a god or goddess in the ancient Greek world, either as a way of asking them for help in advance, or sometimes after the event as a way of giving thanks. And this votive that we're looking at here is an example of one where an individual has been healed by a god, and we can see from the fact that they've represented a leg on the votive that it was a leg in this particular case. But there are so many different types of these anatomical votives with all sorts of body parts. Now, the inscription on it tells us that the person who dedicated this anatomical votive was a woman called Tyche, and the inscription reads, "Tyche dedicated this to Asclepius and Tyche as a thank offering." Asclepius was the Greek god of medicine, and Hygeia was his daughter, and it's from her that we get the word hygiene. And it was left at a shrine to Asclepius on the island of Melos, and the date of this particular piece is between 100 and 200 AD, so we're talking about the Greek-Roman period, and if you're interested, it's now housed in the British Museum today. Now, Asclepius didn't just have a shrine on Melos, he had shrines all over the Greek and Roman world. In fact, his two most famous shrines were on Kos and Epidaurus. And this really shows us that Asclepius had pan-Hellenic appeal. He was important to all Greeks. Of course, health is an everyday concern. And in fact, his worship tended to peak, obviously, in times of epidemic. So famously, the Athenians built a new Asclepion, or shrine to Asclepius, in the 420s BC on the slope of the Acropolis, following the plague in Athens. Now, these anatomical votives that were left at site and dedicated to the gods show us that Greek religion was very active. Participation was important, ritual was important, and there was an idea of reciprocity between you and the god. The Greeks really believed that the gods could take a direct role in their lives. Now, the process by which the Greeks believed they could be healed at shrines to Asclepius was known as incubation. And we're going to have a look now at some examples of other votives that were left at the sites that aren't necessarily anatomical. We don't see the part of the anatomy, but we do get a story or a miracle outlined for us by that particular inscription. And in fact, we're told that Pausanias, a famous travel writer, went round the Greek world and actually saw these stories at some of the sites. And they are particularly miraculous, and we're going to have a look at a couple of those together. But coming back to that idea of incubation first, people would go to sites associated with Asclepius, and they would actually sleep in the sanctuary, usually in a kind of cupboard, stoa area, and they believed that the god Asclepius, or in some cases his sons, would come to them in their dreams and heal them. Now, it is worth pointing out, obviously the Greeks have this very religious aspect to health here. They believe that they can actually have an epiphany and be visited by a god, but there were doctors or physicians at these sites too. The priests were able to do surgery, and we found surgical tools, for example, at Epidaurus. So it's kind of part religious, part modern hospital. So like everything with Greek religion, there's kind of flexible boundaries between the two areas. So let's have a look at a couple of the stories together that were left on these votive tablets. Clio was pregnant for 5 years. After she had been pregnant for 5 years, she came as a client to the god and slept in the sanctuary. So that's the incubation I was talking about. As soon as she came out of the inner sanctuary and was outside the temple enclosure, she gave birth to a son. This son, as soon as he was born, washed himself in the spring and walked around with his mother. After this experience, she put up a votive offering. Wonder not at the greatness of this tablet, but of the god, because he healed Clio after she had been pregnant and carried the burden in her womb for 5 years until she slept in the sanctuary. And then we've got this second one here, Nicasabula, Messenian, slept in the sanctuary in order to have children. So that seems to have been a common issue for why women visited these sanctuaries. And saw a dream. The god seemed to come to her carrying a snake that went toward her, and that she had intercourse with the snake. After this, she bore 2 male children within the year. Now, lots of these stories are absurd and seemingly impossible, and it can be fun to try and pick them apart and think about, well, what's the reality behind that one? But what I want to finish on is a quote I particularly like by the scholar Fritz Graf. It says, it's pointless trying to filter out the real stories from the imaginary ones, because all that matters is that we can tell the almost limitless faith that the ancient Greeks had in the power of their gods.